The stars stretched endlessly before the human ship as it traveled through space toward the center of galactic civilization. Commander Jake Harris stood on the bridge watching the viewport with careful eyes. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. They were all nervous, though they tried not to show it. This was humanity's first real meeting with the Galactic Council, and everything had to go perfectly. The ship was called Horizon's Edge, and it carried 50 people from Earth. Most were diplomats, scientists, and military officers. But one passenger was different from all the others. Lucy Bennett sat in the common area, reading a book on quantum mathematics. She was only 12 years old, small for her age, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence and curiosity about everything around her. Lucy was special. She had solved a mathematics problem that had confused the greatest alien minds for hundreds of years. When the Galactic Council heard about this, they sent a personal invitation for her to visit their central world. Her parents, both researchers, had been so proud. Commander Harris had promised them he would keep their daughter safe. He meant to keep that promise. The journey took 3 weeks through strange space routes that bent reality in ways humans were still learning to understand. Finally, they arrived at Axiom Prime, the heart of Council territory. The planet below glowed with lights from billions of inhabitants. Massive structures reached up into the atmosphere, and ships from dozens of different species moved in carefully controlled patterns around the world. Jake Harris felt his stomach tighten with worry as they descended. Something about this place felt wrong, though he could not explain why. Maybe it was how the alien traffic controllers spoke to them with barely hidden contempt. Maybe it was the way their escort ships kept weapons locked on the human vessel even after they identified themselves. Or maybe it was just instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 wars back on Earth. They landed at a facility that stretched for miles in every direction. Alien beings moved through corridors that seemed designed for creatures much larger than humans. The delegation was met by a group of council representatives, including High Arbiter Zexthor. He was a Kryn, a being made of living crystal that refracted light in beautiful patterns. When he spoke, his voice sounded like glass chimes, though the translation device made his words understandable. "Humans," Zexthor said without any warmth in his tone. "You have been granted the honor of presenting yourselves to the Council. We will evaluate your worthiness to join galactic civilization." Commander Harris stepped forward and offered the formal greeting they had practiced. "We come in peace, seeking friendship and mutual understanding." Zexthor's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been amusement. "Peace is irrelevant. Capability is what matters. We will test you to determine your value to the greater community." The testing began immediately. The adult humans were taken to different areas of the facility. They underwent physical examinations, psychological evaluations, and demonstrations of human technology. The aliens watched everything with cold, analytical interest. They took samples, asked endless questions, and showed no emotion beyond scientific curiosity. But their real interest was in Lucy. The child was escorted to a separate wing of the facility, accompanied by Commander Harris and 2 other officers. The Council's Science Directorate wanted to understand how such a young human could solve problems their greatest minds could not. They said they wanted to study human cognitive development. They promised the examination would be brief and painless. Commander Harris should have refused right then. He should have taken Lucy and left immediately. But he was a military man following orders, and Earth's government desperately wanted this alliance to work. So he allowed the scientists to take Lucy into their laboratory, though every instinct screamed at him to stop them. The first day seemed fine. Lucy came out of the lab tired but excited, talking about the amazing equipment she had seen and the interesting questions they asked her. She showed no signs of distress. Harris relaxed slightly, thinking perhaps his worries had been foolish. The second day was different. Lucy emerged quieter, moving more slowly. When Harris asked if she was all right, she nodded but would not meet his eyes. He demanded to speak with the lead scientist, a multi-limbed creature called Vorkes. The alien assured him that everything was proceeding according to protocol. Some discomfort was normal in scientific testing, he said. It would be over soon. On the 3rd day, Commander Harris was told he could no longer accompany Lucy to the laboratory. Council security personnel blocked his path, their weapons ready. When he protested, Zexthor himself appeared and explained coldly that human emotional attachment was interfering with proper scientific procedure. Harris and his officers would be confined to quarters while the testing continued. "This is not acceptable," Harris growled, his hand moving toward his sidearm. "That child is under my protection." "That specimen is under council authority," Zexthor replied. "You are guests here. You have no rights, no authority, and no choice. Resist and you will be imprisoned. Your entire delegation will be expelled from council space." Harris found himself surrounded by alien guards, each one larger and better armed than any human. He made a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. He backed down. He let them take Lucy away. He told himself it was for the greater good, for humanity's future, for the Alliance. 3 weeks passed in a nightmare of waiting. Harris and his crew were kept in comfortable but secure quarters. They could not communicate with Earth. They could not access any computer systems. They could not find out what was happening to Lucy. When they demanded information, the guards ignored them. Harris spent those weeks planning. He studied the facility's layout from memory. He identified weak points in their security. He gathered weapons from wherever he could find them. His crew prepared for violence, knowing they might all die but unwilling to abandon a child to whatever was happening in that laboratory. On the 21st day, Harris made his move. His team overwhelmed the guards through pure desperation and fury. They fought their way through the facility, leaving injured aliens behind them. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Security forces mobilized to stop them, but nothing could stop Jake Harris from reaching that laboratory. When he finally burst through the doors, what he saw would haunt him forever. Lucy lay on a medical platform in the center of a stark white room. Her small body was connected to dozens of machines by wires and tubes. Monitoring devices covered her skin. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. She did not react when Harris shouted her name. She did not move when he disconnected the machines and lifted her into his arms. The council scientists barely acknowledged the intrusion. They continued recording their data, discussing their findings in clicking, whistling languages. One of them, Vorkes, turned to Harris and spoke in a tone that suggested mild annoyance. "You are interrupting important research. The specimen has provided valuable data about human pain tolerance, psychological breaking points, and cognitive degradation under stress." Harris wanted to kill every alien in that room. His hand trembled on his weapon, but Lucy was in his arms, so light and fragile, and getting her to safety was all that mattered. He carried her from the laboratory, his team forming a protective barrier around them. They fought their way back to their ship, leaving a trail of destruction and injured aliens behind them. The council made no real attempt to stop them from leaving. Why would they? They had learned what they wanted to know about humans. They had tested a specimen until it broke and recorded every moment. The data was valuable. One damaged primitive was an acceptable loss. There would be no consequences for their actions. They were the Galactic Council, rulers of known space. Who would dare challenge them? Horizon's Edge fled from Axiom Prime with its traumatized crew and one broken child. Behind them, High Arbiter Zexthor watched the human ship disappear into faster-than-light travel. He felt satisfied with the results of their research. Humans were weak, easily broken, unworthy of equal status in galactic civilization. They could be controlled, exploited, and dismissed. It never occurred to Zexthor that he had just made the worst mistake in Council history. It never occurred to any of them that they had not been studying human weakness. They had been teaching humans exactly how much they should hate the Council. They had been showing humans exactly what kind of revenge was justified. The journey home took 2 weeks. Lucy never spoke during that entire time. She ate when fed, moved when directed, and stared at nothing with empty eyes. Commander Harris sat with her every day, apologizing endlessly for failing to protect her. His crew moved through their duties like ghosts, haunted by their own failure. But ahead of them, racing faster than their ship could travel, went a message. A journalist named Peter Cole had been embedded with the delegation. He had managed to hide recording equipment in his clothes. He had captured everything that happened to Lucy Bennett. And 3 days before Horizon's Edge reached Earth, that footage arrived on every screen, every computer, and every communication device in human civilization. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you hurt a human child. Part 2, The Awakening. The footage appeared on Earth 3 days before Commander Harris brought Lucy Bennett home. Peter Cole's hidden recording showed everything in brutal, undeniable detail. A 12-year-old girl strapped to alien medical equipment, her screams echoing through sterile laboratories. Council scientists discussing her pain responses with clinical detachment. 3 weeks of systematic torture disguised as scientific research, all captured in perfect clarity. Within 6 hours, every nation on Earth had seen it. Within 12 hours, riots erupted in every major city. People poured into the streets carrying signs with Lucy's face. They burned council embassy buildings and attacked any alien presence on Earth. Governments scrambled to maintain order while dealing with their own rage at what had been done to one of their children. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every nation gathered in Geneva, their faces grim and their voices unified in ways that had never happened before in human history. Wars were forgotten. Political differences disappeared. Economic disputes became meaningless. For the first time since humans learned to speak, they were completely united with a single purpose. Admiral Kate Morrison received her orders while watching the footage for the 20th time. Each viewing made her angrier. She was 53 years old, a career military officer who had fought in conflicts on 3 continents and 2 planets. She understood violence and death. She had made hard decisions that cost lives, but watching what the Council did to Lucy Bennett pushed her past any limits she thought she had. The orders were simple and direct. Take command of Earth's military forces. Prepare for total war. Make the Council pay for what they did. There would be no negotiations, no diplomacy, no mercy. Humanity wanted blood. 3 days later, Commander Harris arrived on Earth. He carried Lucy from his ship, her small form wrapped in blankets, her eyes still empty and distant. Cameras captured every moment as he delivered her to a medical facility in Geneva. Her parents were there, waiting with hope and dread in their faces. When they saw their daughter, when they understood what had been done to her, their screams echoed through the hospital corridors. Lucy was placed in the best trauma care facility humanity could provide. Doctors examined her body and found evidence of invasive procedures, tissue sampling, neurological testing, and experiments that had no medical purpose beyond satisfying alien curiosity about human suffering. Psychologists tried to reach the girl trapped behind those empty eyes. Sometimes she responded, sometimes she spoke, but she was different now, broken in ways that might never fully heal. The footage from the hospital became public. People watched Lucy's parents sitting beside her bed day after day, holding the hands of a daughter who barely recognized them. They watched doctors trying every treatment they knew. They watched a child who had been bright and curious and full of life reduced to a shadow who flinched at sudden movements and woke, screaming from nightmares. The Council sent their official response 2 weeks after the incident. The message arrived on every diplomatic channel, formal and cold in its bureaucratic language. The testing conducted on specimen Lucy Bennett had been within legal parameters established by Council charter. Her parents had volunteered her for scientific exchange. All procedures followed proper protocol. No violations had occurred. The matter was closed. Admiral Morrison read the message while sitting in a military strategy meeting with Earth's top commanders. Colonel Danny Price, head of Special Operations, slammed his fist on the conference table hard enough to crack the wood. They're calling it legal. They tortured a child and they're hiding behind their own laws. Then we show them human law, Morrison replied quietly, the kind written in fire and blood. Dr. Helen Yu brought up holographic displays showing the Council's military capabilities. The xenobiologist had been studying alien species for 15 years, learning their strengths and weaknesses. Now she turned that knowledge toward a single goal. They outnumber us 300 to 1. They have weapons we barely understand and defensive technology that makes conventional warfare impossible. So we stop being conventional, Morrison said. Humans are good at exactly one thing better than any species in the galaxy. We're good at killing. Time to remind the universe why Earth has so many words for warfare. The mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard from Earth to Jupiter stations worked around the clock building warships. Not exploration vessels or cargo haulers or diplomatic ships. Warships pure and simple, designed for one purpose, destroying Council targets. Human engineers incorporated every lesson learned from centuries of warfare. The ships were smaller than Council dreadnoughts but faster and meaner. They carried weapons that violated every rule of civilized combat because humans no longer cared about being civilized. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. People who had never considered military service wanted to fight. Retired soldiers came back to active duty. Scientists abandoned their research to design better weapons. Factory workers took triple shifts to build ammunition and armor. Earth and her colonies became a civilization mobilized for total war. 6 months passed. The Council watched human activity with growing unease, but also with arrogance. They had seen 1,000 species threaten retaliation over the centuries. None had followed through against Council might. Humans would learn their place eventually. A few demonstrations of Council power would bring them back to the negotiating table. But then Commander Harris requested a meeting with Admiral Morrison. He came to her office carrying something unexpected. Lucy Bennett walked beside him holding his hand. She was 13 years old now, taller but still thin from months in medical care. She moved carefully as if her body might break at any moment. But something had changed in her eyes. The emptiness was gone, replaced with something hard and burning. "Admiral," Harris said formally, "Lucy has something she wants to say." Morrison knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. She had seen the footage. She knew what this child had endured. "You don't have to be here, Lucy. You've been through enough." "No," Lucy said quietly. Her voice was soft but steady. "I need to be here. I need to help. They need to understand what they did. They need to learn." Morrison studied the girl's face and saw something that made her both proud and heartbroken. She saw humanity reflected back, damaged, furious, and absolutely unwilling to forgive. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to feel it," Lucy replied. "Everything they did to me. Everything they took from me. I want them to understand that hurting one human child means the end of their entire civilization." The Admiral looked at this survivor and made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Then let's teach them." The military briefings continued. Colonel Price showed reconnaissance data from Council space. "Their border stations are overconfident. They think we're too primitive to threaten them seriously. We can exploit that." Dr. Yu presented her research. "I've identified biological weaknesses in every Council species. Their own medical databases gave me everything I needed. They never imagined anyone would weaponize this information." Morrison pulled up star charts. "We hit them everywhere at once. Not military targets first. We go straight for their homes, their families, their children. We show them exactly what it feels like." Someone in the back of the room objected. "That's terrorism. That's genocide. We'll be worse than they are." "No." Lucy spoke up from where she sat quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "They chose to hurt me when I came in peace. They chose to document their torture and call it science. They chose to tell humanity that what they did was legal and acceptable. We're not choosing to be worse than them. We're choosing to make sure they never do this again to anyone." The room fell silent. This child, this victim, had just given them permission to burn the galaxy. And everyone present understood that she was right. The Council had started this. Humanity would finish it. Admiral Morrison gave the orders that would launch humanity's campaign of vengeance. "All ships are authorized to engage any Council target. No mercy, no prisoners, no surrender. Every attack broadcasts the same message. This is for Lucy Bennett. Let them know exactly why they're dying." 300 warships left Earth's solar system in the largest military deployment in human history. They scattered across Council space in small groups, each captain given authority to strike targets of opportunity. The Council's defensive fleet scrambled to respond, but they were designed to fight conventional wars between civilized species. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that refused to follow any rules. The first strike came at Helios Gate, a border station that had stood unchallenged for 800 years. A single human ship approached broadcasting diplomatic codes. The station allowed it to dock. 50 human commandos came aboard carrying nothing but greetings and formal documents. 20 minutes later, explosives hidden in their cybernetic implants detonated throughout the station, while their ship revealed its true nature as a weapon platform. Part 3. The first strike, the Council's confidence began cracking after the first dozen attacks, but they still believed they could crush humanity through sheer military superiority. High Arbiter Zexthor addressed the remaining Council members with crystalline certainty in his voice. They would triple their border fleets, authorize their most powerful weapons, and teach these primitive humans the cost of defiance. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They would not fall to one angry species throwing a tantrum over a single test subject. But the Council had never fought humans before. They had never faced a species that turned warfare into art, that studied violence the way others studied music. that had spent thousands of years perfecting new ways to kill. Earth's history was written in blood across every continent. Humans had fought wars for land, resources, religion, ideology, and sometimes just because they could. They knew things about combat that the Council had forgotten during their long peace. Admiral Morrison coordinated the campaign from a command ship that never stayed in one system for more than 6 hours. She moved constantly, always ahead of Council pursuit, directing 300 vessels that harassed Council space from 100 different angles. Each captain had complete authority to choose their own targets. This was not a conventional war with front lines and strategic objectives. This was chaos made into strategy, randomness turned into weapon. Colonel Danny Price led the ground operations, training teams of operatives who could move through Council space undetected. His people were volunteers who all had the same thing in common. They had all watched the footage of Lucy Bennett. They had all seen what the Council did to a child. And they had all volunteered to make the Council understand exactly what that meant. Price's first major operation targeted a Council governance station orbiting a planet called Vexar Prime. The station housed 12,000 administrators from 7 different species, all working to maintain Council authority across 50 systems. It was a symbol of their power, a demonstration of unified galactic civilization. The human team infiltrated over the course of 3 weeks, arriving on different transport ships, posing as maintenance workers and merchants and refugees from human space seeking Council protection. They gathered weapons from components that meant nothing separately, but became deadly when assembled. They mapped every corridor, every security checkpoint, every escape route. On a Wednesday morning by Earth Standard Time, 30 humans struck simultaneously across the station. They did not bother with subtlety. They opened fire in crowded corridors, planted explosives in life support systems, and broadcast a simple message on every communication channel. For Lucy Bennett, the station descended into chaos. Security forces responded but found themselves fighting shadows. The humans moved in small groups, hit targets, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. When cornered, they fought with desperate fury, often choosing to detonate explosives rather than surrender. Within 6 hours, the station was crippled. Within 12 hours, it was evacuating. Within 24 hours, it was a spinning wreck in orbit, half its population dead and the rest fleeing in whatever ships they could find. Colonel Price escaped with 15 of his original 30 operatives. He regretted the losses but knew they had accomplished something important. The Council could no longer assume their administrative centers were safe. Nowhere was safe anymore. The Council's military responded with overwhelming force, deploying battle fleets to protect key systems. But human tactics evolved faster than Council strategy. When Council ships guarded administrative stations, humans hit shipyards. When fleets protected shipyards, humans struck supply convoys. When the Council spread their forces to cover everything, humans concentrated attacks on isolated targets. A pattern emerged in the chaos. Every human attack was preceded by the same broadcast. For Lucy Bennett. The Council tried to jam the transmissions, but humans always found ways to broadcast their message. They wanted the galaxy to know exactly why this was happening. They wanted every Council citizen to understand that their leadership had brought this destruction upon them by torturing one child. Dr. Helen Yu worked in laboratories far from the fighting, but her contribution to the war effort was more devastating than any weapon. She studied every scrap of biological data the Council had published about their own species. Medical journals, genetic research, biological surveys, all of it was public information, shared freely among scientists. The Council had never imagined anyone would weaponize such knowledge. You designed targeted bioweapons for each Council species. Not indiscriminate plagues, but surgical strikes at the biological level. The Kryn crystalline structure had a weakness to certain resonant frequencies. The Tekron neural system could be disrupted by synthetic proteins. The Vral respiratory membranes dissolved when exposed to engineered microbes. You created weapons that made conventional warfare look merciful by comparison. "This is genocide," one of her assistants said quietly, watching the simulations of what these weapons would do. "We're planning to wipe out entire species." You looked at the younger scientist with eyes that had lost something fundamental during the past months. "They tortured a child for 3 weeks and called it legal. They dismissed our protests. They told us to accept our place. Now we're showing them exactly what humans are capable of when our children are harmed. This is not genocide. This is education. Admiral Morrison received Yu's research and understood immediately what it meant. This was not just military advantage. This was the power to end the Council completely. She called a meeting with Earth's civilian government, presenting the bioweapons and their projected effects. The President of Earth, a woman named Margaret Stone, studied the data for a long time before speaking. If we use these weapons, we become the monsters. We become worse than the Council. We became monsters the day we decided revenge was more important than mercy, Morrison replied flatly. That decision was made when the footage of Lucy Bennett reached Earth, when billions of humans watched that child scream and saw the Council call it legal. We crossed the line months ago. The only question now is whether we're willing to finish what we started. President Stone looked at the faces around the conference table, military commanders, scientific advisors, political leaders. Every one of them had the same expression. Cold determination mixed with barely controlled rage. The entire human species had unified around a single emotion, and that emotion was fury. Deploy the weapons, Stone ordered, but broadcast warnings first. Give the Council's civilians time to evacuate. We're not trying to kill innocents. We're trying to destroy the government that sanctioned torture. Morrison shook her head. They didn't give Lucy warning. They didn't let her evacuate. They strapped her to a table and hurt her until she broke, then documented every second for their research. If we show mercy now, we teach the wrong lesson. The galaxy needs to understand that harming human children has absolute consequences. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Morrison was saying. They would have to become the thing they hated. They would have to inflict suffering on the same scale that had been inflicted on one of their own. They would have to make the innocent pay for the crimes of their leaders. Lucy Bennett herself broke the silence. She had been sitting quietly in the corner, present at Morrison's invitation. At 14 years old, she attended strategic military meetings about genocide. Do it, she said simply. No warnings, no mercy. They need to learn. President Stone closed her eyes for a long moment, then nodded. Deploy everything. Show them what it costs to hurt us. The bioweapons were distributed to human infiltration teams across Council space. Each team carried viral agents specifically designed for the species they would encounter. The operation was coordinated to begin simultaneously across 50 systems. On a single day that would become known as Reckoning Day in human history, the weapons were released. The Kryn homeworld of Crystalis was first. Agent Carla Stevens led the team that placed viral dispersal devices throughout the planet's major cities. The virus spread through the Kryn population within hours, invisible and unstoppable. It attacked their crystalline structure at the molecular level, causing fractures that spread like cracks through glass. The pain was excruciating and lasted for days before the structure finally shattered completely. High Arbiter. Zexthor felt the first crack in his lower structure while reviewing military reports in his private chambers. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, sharp and burning in ways that crystalline beings rarely experienced. He called for physicians, but they arrived already showing symptoms themselves. Within hours, every Kryn on the planet was suffering. Within days, billions were dying. The same pattern repeated across Council space. The Tikran neural virus caused their four-armed bodies to convulse uncontrollably as their nervous systems failed. The Vrail found their water supplies poisoned with compounds that dissolved their respiratory membranes, drowning them in their own atmosphere. The Horth collective consciousness fractured as nanomachines disrupted their pheromone communication, leaving individuals trapped in lonely isolation for the first time in their species' history. Part 4. The Burning. The Kryn homeworld burned in ways that defied conventional understanding of fire. Crystalis had been the most beautiful planet in known space, where cities refracted sunlight into cascading rainbows, and billions of crystalline beings lived in harmony. Now those same cities echoed with screams that harmonized into a chorus of agony that could be heard from orbit. Dr. Helen Yu's bioweapon worked exactly as designed. The virus spread through the Kryn population with mathematical precision, attacking the crystalline matrix that formed their bodies. It did not kill quickly because Yu had specifically engineered it not to. The fracturing process took days, sometimes weeks, during which every Kryn on the planet experienced pain beyond anything their species had evolved to comprehend. High Arbiter Zexthor lasted longer than most. His position gave him access to the best medical care available, though his physicians were dying even as they tried to treat him. He spent his final days watching his civilization collapse through view screens in his chamber. Reports came in from across the planet. Government facilities empty as officials succumbed to the virus. Hospitals overwhelmed with patients nobody could help. Entire cities going silent as their populations shattered into crystalline dust. On the 12th day of his suffering, as cracks spread through his structure like lightning through glass, Zexthor finally understood what humanity had been trying to teach. This was not war. This was consequence. They had hurt one human child, dismissed it as legal procedure, and believed there would be no price to pay. Now the price was being extracted from every Kryn alive. His final thought before his consciousness shattered along with his body was simple. We should have listened. The Kryn were not the only ones to burn. Humanity had created specific bioweapons for each founding species of the Council, each one tailored to cause maximum suffering while allowing time for understanding. The galaxy needed to see this. They needed to know that human vengeance was not random violence but calculated education. The Tekron homeworld experienced neural cascade failures that left their entire population convulsing in agony. Their forearms flailed uselessly as motor control vanished. Their complex brains, capable of processing information at speeds that amazed human scientists, became prisons of awareness, trapped in bodies that no longer responded to commands. They could think, could understand what was happening, but could do nothing except experience the horror of their own dissolution. On the Vral waterworld of Corvesh, the oceans themselves became weapons. Human agents introduced engineered microbes that multiplied exponentially, spreading through the planet's interconnected seas. The Vral, who breathed through delicate membrane systems, found themselves drowning in water that had sustained their species for millions of years. They fled to the surface, gasping in thin atmosphere, their bodies convulsing as respiratory systems failed. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones took days, suffocating slowly while fully aware of their fate. Admiral Morrison watched reports from her command ship, her expression carved from stone. Her bridge crew worked in silence, uncomfortable with what they had become but unwilling to stop. They had all seen the footage of Lucy Bennett. They had all watched a child scream while aliens took notes. Whatever horror they inflicted now felt justified by that memory. Admiral, Commander Lisa Grant spoke quietly. We're receiving surrender offers from 19 Council species. They're offering complete capitulation, reparations, anything we demand. Ignore them. Morrison replied without emotion. We're not negotiating. Some of these species had nothing to do with what happened to Lucy, Grant said carefully. The Delcari voted against the testing. The Orphean tried to intervene. Shouldn't we show mercy to those who oppose the Council's actions? Morrison turned to look at her second-in-command. The Delcari and Orphean voted against testing Lucy, but they did nothing when it happened anyway. They filed protests, signed documents, expressed concerns through proper channels. Then they went home and continued their normal lives while a child suffered. Complicity through inaction is still complicity. They all learned the same lesson. Colonel Danny Price operated on the ground across a dozen systems, coordinating teams that ensured the bioweapons spread properly. He took no pleasure in the work, but he felt no guilt either. He had watched his own daughter grow up safe and protected, and the thought of anyone hurting her the way the Council hurt Lucy filled him with cold rage that made this mission feel like justice. His teams encountered resistance from Council, military forces trying to establish quarantine zones. The battles were brief and brutal. Human soldiers fought with the desperation of people who knew they were already damned and wanted to ensure their damnation counted for something. When Council forces captured human operatives, they found soldiers who preferred death to surrender, who activated explosive implants rather than reveal information. One captured Tekron officer, dying slowly from neural cascade, asked Price why humans fought this way. Why they showed no mercy, no honor, no compassion. You want to know about honor? Price asked quietly, his weapon steady. Lucy Bennett came to you in peace. She was 12 years old, excited to meet aliens, eager to learn. Your people strapped her to a table and spent 3 weeks breaking her while taking notes. Where was your honor then? Where was your compassion? The Tekron had no answer. He died still trying to understand what his people had unleashed. Dr. Yu worked 18-hour days in her laboratory, monitoring the bioweapons and making adjustments as needed. She had become something she never imagined, an architect of genocide, a designer of species-ending plagues. Sometimes she looked at her hands and wondered if she would ever feel clean again. Then she would remember why she was doing this, and her resolve hardened. Her assistant, a young scientist named Craig Foster, found her one night staring at projections showing casualty estimates measured in billions. "How do we live with this?" he asked quietly. "We live with it the same way the council lived with torturing Lucy," you replied. "We tell ourselves it was necessary. We tell ourselves they brought it on themselves. We tell ourselves that preventing future atrocities justifies present horrors." She paused, her eyes distant. "Whether any of that is true, I honestly don't know anymore. But it's too late to stop now." The galactic community fractured completely as the scale of human vengeance became clear. Species that had been allies for centuries turned on each other, each blaming the others for the Council's actions. Trade collapsed. Communication networks failed. Entire civilizations abandoned their homeworlds, fleeing to remote systems away from human attention. Some species tried to fight back. The Horth Collective, before their pheromone communication was disrupted, organized a counterattack against human forces. 3 of their battle fleets converged on a human staging area, determined to show these primitives the cost of their aggression. Admiral Morrison met them with a trap. She had positioned her ships to appear vulnerable, then sprung the ambush with kinetic weapons fired at relativistic speeds. The Horth fleets vanished in fireballs that briefly outshone the local star. There were no survivors. Morrison broadcast the footage across all channels with a simple message. "This is what happens when you threaten humanity. Your move." Nobody made another move against human forces after that. On Earth, public opinion was complex and divided. Some celebrated the destruction of the Council, feeling vindicated that Lucy's suffering had been avenged. Others protested the genocide, arguing that humanity had become the very monsters they claimed to oppose. Religious leaders struggled to reconcile faith with the systematic extermination of entire species. Philosophers debated whether any crime justified this level of retaliation. But the government remained united. President Stone addressed Earth and all human colonies in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. "What we are doing is terrible," she said simply. "What we are doing is probably unforgivable. But what was done to Lucy Bennett demanded response. The Council tortured a child and called it legal. They dismissed our protests. They believed we were too weak, too primitive, too divided to threaten them. We are showing them exactly how wrong they were." She paused, her face showing the weight of decisions no leader should have to make. "History will judge us harshly for what we do now. Our children will grow up knowing their species committed genocide. But those children will also grow up in a galaxy that understands human children are not to be harmed. Ever. For any reason. That lesson is worth any price." Lucy Bennett herself rarely appeared publicly, but when she did, her presence silenced all debate. At 15 years old, she had become a symbol of both innocent suffering and terrible vengeance. People looked at her and saw justification for everything humanity had done. They saw a child who had trusted the universe and been broken for it. They saw why mercy had died and rage had taken its place. In an interview with a journalist who asked if she felt responsible for the billions dying across Council space, Lucy answered with quiet certainty, "I didn't torture myself. I didn't dismiss humanity's protests. I didn't tell my species to accept our place as inferior. The Council did all that. What's happening now is just the natural consequence of their choices. Part 5. The Reckoning. 3 years after Lucy Bennett entered a Council laboratory as a hopeful child, she stood before what remained of galactic civilization as something entirely different. The Galactic Assembly met on a neutral station, hastily constructed after the Council's central worlds burned. Representatives from 70 surviving species gathered in a chamber that felt empty, despite the crowds. So many species were simply gone now, extinct or reduced to scattered refugees hiding in remote systems. Lucy was 16 years old. She had grown taller, though she still seemed small standing at the podium before thousands of alien delegates. The scars from her torture were invisible now, hidden by time and medical treatment. But everyone present knew her story. Her name had become synonymous with humanity's capacity for rage. Children across the galaxy were taught to fear what happened when humans were provoked. Admiral Morrison stood behind Lucy, her uniform decorated with medals that felt more like marks of shame than honor. Colonel Price commanded security, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Dr. Helen Yu sat in the human delegation, her hands folded carefully to hide the trembling that never quite stopped anymore. They were war criminals by any reasonable definition, architects of genocide, destroyers of worlds, but they were also the only reason the galaxy was having this conversation instead of continuing to burn. The assembly chamber fell silent as Lucy began to speak. Her voice was clear and steady, carrying through translation systems to reach every being present in their native language. My name is Lucy Bennett. When I was 12 years old, I came to your council in peace. I wanted to learn. I believed in galactic unity. I thought the universe was a place where intelligence and curiosity would be celebrated and protected. She paused, letting the words settle. Every delegate knew what came next. Instead, your scientists hurt me. They broke me. They treated me like an object, like a specimen to be studied, like something less than alive. And when your testing was done, when you had learned everything you wanted to know about human pain tolerance and psychological breaking points, you called it legal procedure and dismissed humanity's protests. Lucy's hands gripped the podium. Her voice remained calm, but something blazed behind her eyes that made even the largest predator species present feel small. What happened next was not war. War has rules. War has negotiations. War has the possibility of surrender and mercy. What my species did to yours was simpler. It was consequence. You hurt a child and humanity made you understand exactly what that costs. She activated holographic displays that filled the chamber with images of burning worlds. Crystallis reduced to dust. Corvesh's poisoned oceans. Tekran cities full of convulsing bodies. A dozen homeworlds destroyed, billions dead, civilizations ended. The delegates who survived watched recordings of their own people dying, and understood they had been spared only by accident of genetics, by random chance that they were not among the founding council species. We killed billions of your people, Lucy continued, her voice steady despite the horror on the screens. We destroyed centuries of culture. We used your own scientific research against you, turned your medicine into weapons, and demonstrated that intelligence without empathy is just another path to extinction. A Vrail delegate, one of the few who survived the ocean poisoning, made a warbling sound of distress. You stand before us proud of genocide? No, Lucy said flatly, and for the first time her voice broke slightly. I wake up screaming every night. I have panic attacks when I see medical equipment. I will probably never recover from what your council did to me. And knowing that billions died because of what happened in that laboratory makes it worse, not better. She took a breath, steadying herself. But I understand why it happened this way. You had to learn. The entire galaxy had to learn. There are lines civilized beings do not cross, and harming children is the brightest, boldest line in human psychology. You crossed it. You paid the price. Now everyone knows the cost. Admiral Morrison stepped forward to join Lucy at the podium. This is not a negotiation, she said in a voice that had ordered the deaths of billions. This is us explaining the new reality. Humanity is not asking permission to exist in your galaxy. We're telling you how things will work now. You cannot police the entire galaxy. A Horth delegate protested, his pheromone communication translated into words. You are one species. We are 70. Eventually your power will fade. Then test us, Colonel Price said from his security position. We burned half your worlds with a fraction of our fleet. You really want to discover what we can do when we stop showing restraint? The chamber erupted in shocked noise. Showing restraint. These humans who had committed genocide thought they had been showing restraint. The implications were terrifying. Dr. Yu approached the podium carrying a data storage device. This contains every bioweapon we created, every tactical analysis of council species, every vulnerability we discovered during our campaign. We're sharing it freely with every species in this assembly. The shock intensified. Delegates from 100 species tried to process what they were hearing. Humans were giving away the weapons that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. You continued over the commotion. You need to understand something fundamental about humans. We're not your enemies unless you make us your enemies. We want peace. We want trade and cultural exchange and cooperation. But if you hurt us, especially if you hurt our children, we don't seek proportional response. We seek extinction-level retribution. She held up the data device. So we're giving you the tools to defend yourselves against us. Because the best defense you have is to never give us a reason to come after you. Never harm a human child. Never torture one of our people. Never dismiss our protests or call our pain legal procedure. Follow those simple rules and humans will be your greatest allies. Break them and we will burn your worlds to ash. Lucy raised her hand and the chamber quieted again. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to explore the universe and learn about alien cultures and contribute to the great community of intelligent species. The council took that dream and made it into a nightmare. Then my species took that nightmare and weaponized it against an entire galaxy. She looked across the assembly, meeting eyes and visual organs of beings from 70 different species. Some were familiar, some were completely alien, but all shared the same expression, fear mixed with dawning understanding. So here is what happens now. Humanity will establish borders and patrol them with overwhelming force. Any species that wants peaceful contact will receive it. But you will follow our protocols, enter our space following our rules, and accept that we are not the weak primitives you thought we were. Any species that wants to build something better than the Council will be welcomed as genuine partners. We will share technology. We will trade knowledge. We will work together. Admiral Morrison continued the thought. But any species that threatens us, that harms our people, that even looks at a human child the wrong way will face total war. We have 300 planet-killing weapons in production right now. We'll have 1,000 within 2 years. Test us again and there will not be enough left of your species to remember what you did wrong. The assembly descended into chaos. Arguments erupted between delegates. Accusations flew about who was responsible for the Council's actions. Pleas for mercy mixed with demands for justice. Through it all, the human delegation stood quietly, waiting for the noise to settle. Finally, an elderly Orphean delegate approached the podium. The Orphean had voted against testing Lucy. They had filed protests and tried to intervene through proper channels. They had done everything civilized beings were supposed to do, but it had not been enough. Now half their species was dead from bioweapons that did not care about good intentions. Was it worth it? The Orphean asked Lucy directly. Was burning our worlds worth what you gained? Lucy met the alien's eyes. Ask me again in 20 years when I might have learned to sleep through the night. Ask me again when I don't flinch at sudden movements. Ask me again when the number of my nightmares is less than the number of your dead. That is not an answer, the Orphean said quietly. It's the only answer I have, Lucy replied. Your council made me a symbol. They broke a child to understand humanity. Well, you understand us now. We protect our own. We avenge our injured. We will burn entire civilizations rather than let what happened to me happen to anyone else. She turned to leave, then looked back. Your council thought I was weak because I could be hurt. You learned too late that humanity's strength is not in our ability to endure pain. It's in what we become when our children are harmed. You created this. You opened the door. We're just the ones who walked through it carrying fire. The assembly meeting continued for 3 more days. Treaties were negotiated. Boundaries were established. Trade agreements were drafted. The new galactic order took shape with humanity at its center, not because they asked for that position, but because every other species was too terrified to refuse them. Lucy did not attend the rest of the meetings. She returned to Earth, to a quiet house in Geneva where her parents tried to give her some semblance of normal life. She enrolled in university, studying psychology instead of mathematics. She wanted to understand trauma, to help